Hello and welcome everybody to Getting APIs to Work. Today we say hello to Mike Amundsen. Hey Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. We decided today we want to talk a little bit about API product principles and really just very shortly talk about what does it really take to design good APIs, and to some extent I think you could say just to design good products. Something that has consumers in mind, is built with a certain scale in mind, and is built in a way that it is consumable. How did you came up with this topic, and I really liked it, but like what got you to thinking about this specific topic?
I've been spending a lot of time on this notion of product thinking, and I just think about products that I see in the shelf, products that I see online. So I was thinking a lot about tools. I've been purchasing a lot of yard tools and other things recently, and like how do people design and product and package and distribute these things? And that's when I started coming up with these notions about some principles or as sort of an overall principle of product thinking for APIs.
And I really like the principles because they are simple. There are three simple steps to it, so to speak. And I think they are rooted in general product design or product thinking. And I think that's a very good sign. And now that you said it, I was thinking about the yard tools as well. And I think these principles also would work very well for the yard tools, but let's stick to APIs.
Yes, for today, yes. Yes.
Okay, for today, we'll do the API episode of that.
Yeah.
Let's get started right away with like, what is the first principle that you came up with where it's important to keep that in mind when you're designing your API products?
Yeah. So sort of the big principle is to leverage global reach to help solve problems you haven't thought of for people you've never met before. And that first element is global reach, is sort of thinking of the big picture. When you're working on a problem, what you want to do is kind of leverage the possibility of distributing this widely. So that's really the first element. And you can think of global reach as just this ability to be in the right place at the right time, to speak in a language that your consumers use. So that language, in the case of APIs, might be HTTP or GraphQL or something like that, a protocol or a format or something. So that's sort of the first step. Leverage what's already out there.
And the global reach aspect, I think, like you said, like be in the right place. I like that part of what you were saying, because if you're on the internet, that's probably a good place to be nowadays, right? So,
Yeah.
And I think that is really so amazing about the API space, that you have almost by definition, you do have global reach, at least potentially. And you can leverage that in ways that are probably much harder to achieve in many other scenarios. And to me, and I'm sure the same thing happens to you, like I would say every week or every second week, somebody contacts me and says, hey, I have this wonderful idea for an API, right? Like, how would that work? And like, it's amazing the ideas that people come up with to like have these little building blocks, right? And sometimes you're saying, I'm not so sure. But sometimes you think like, yeah, that might work, right?
Yeah. It's one
And
of
I
the things
think
I
that's
really
really
love
the
about
nice
this
part
space.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And so the global reach part, that's kind of, I wouldn't say a given, but that's like at least one of the really unique things about internet and API things. And then you mentioned the building blocks, which already are number 2 in our list. So have something that is self-contained, or like what is the specific definition, or why would you say building block there?
Yeah. When you think about a building block, often what you're trying to do is actually help somebody solve their problem. One of the things you think about when you think about good product design is it's important to solve the user's problem, the customer's problem, not yours. Design it in a way that so you understand their space, you understand their pain. When you go through product design, you kind of go through all of these sort of elements. What is your daily chore and so on and so forth. So it's solving problems that you may necessarily not live every day yourself, right? That you haven't thought of, but your consumers haven't. I may be really good at data management, but maybe my consumers are not. So I'm going to help them solve their data management problems, whatever that problem might be. So I need to kind of put myself in their shoes. So good building blocks are available for others to use in ways maybe we don't necessarily think about them, but they solve the customers or the developers' problems.
I also like to think of building blocks that, let's say, like, really well defined and little things, and combine them, and you can have many of them. And I think if we just go back to kind of the prototypical examples, payment services and messaging services, right? So these are two, I would say, very well defined building blocks, right? That a lot of people need to be solved for them as part of whatever else they want to do. They want to do much more, right? But that is an important part where I say, like, well, if I cannot process payments, my whole thing doesn't work. So,
That's exactly right.
So it's an important one.
Right. Those are great examples. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they still are really, and also very understandable examples, like well-defined, pretty, I would say, kind of narrow in scope, but also pretty essential in many cases. So that's a good starting point for designing like a successful API product.
Yep.
So now we've gone through like these two things of a global reach, then focusing on a building block that can become part of a solution that somebody else is building. Now let's jump to number 3 of the principles.
Yep, and that is designing it for people you've never met. So this has a lot to do with scale. If I have to explain this to each and every consumer, then I'm not going to scale very well, right? So if you want to be on that global reach, or you want to be on that level of solving the problem for many, many, many people, I need to design it and build it and package it in a way that even strangers can understand. So we talk about things like stateless APIs from fielding, or well-documented APIs, or a good definition file like OpenAPI or Async API or Protobuf. All of these elements go into this notion of supporting people you've never met. So you want to keep it, I like the way you talked about it earlier. A building block is well-defined and it's simple. And that means that people who haven't talked to you before can discover it, find it, and use it in some kind of way. And I also would say that it isn't just people, but you need to make it so that it's easy for machines kind of to talk to machines, like, so it's easy to integrate or easy to interoperate with this building block as well.
Yeah, you probably need to cover both, right? On the one hand, you need to cover consumability for those people who are even considering using it. So you have to document it, make sure they understand what it's doing. But then you also want to help them do the actual integration work, which then probably also means that the nicer you are to the machines, the easier that will be for them, right? And then it's always like, how much time does it take until I do my first successful API call and all these.
Right.
Now, I think these 3 steps I really like them because they are simple, and I think they still are steps that in many APIs, when you look at, in particular, organizations and, let's say, internal APIs, these steps are not followed at all. And maybe it's not always necessary to follow all of them, but I would say at least having them in mind, right, is probably something that is helpful, I would say.
Yep. I think whatever you would define as global reach. So it may not be the whole world. Maybe it's just within your company, or maybe it's just within your product division or something like that. But just making sure that you can design a building block that's well defined, like the examples you gave. Payments and SMS messages are great examples of stuff that people use. That it can be integrated into something else, and that you don't have to have a special meeting every time somebody wants to use your API. These are things that can happen at the company level as well as larger levels.
Yeah. And then the next step, but I think we'll keep that for another video because I just love that next topic, right? Would be this question of, and now how do people actually find your stuff? Right now that you've made it consumable, and let's say it actually is a nice API product because you followed those API product principles, but now how do they find it? And I think that is something where there are many different approaches out there, but I think we should leave that for another episode.
I think that's an excellent idea, because that goes sort of beyond the initial principles. How do I discover and connect and share and all these other things? And there's lots of good material there. That'd be a great another episode. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. I'm looking forward to this. But that also means for today, we've covered the things we wanted to cover: API product principles, designing with consumers in mind. I think that really is a good takeaway for everybody in the API space, actually. Mike, thanks so much for being on the show once again.
Yep.
I lost count how often you've been here, but it's great to have you every single time. Thanks
I
so
love
much.
being here. Thanks a lot.
Okay, and thanks everybody for watching. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. And until next time, see you. All the best. Bye.
Bye.